Welcome back to Mr. Hayden's Ag Lessons. This is episode 13, Landscape Design. Welcome back, crew. Happy Monday. I appreciate you tuning in to watch my show today. Hopefully we're getting through the quarantine together, and as these temperatures continue to rise, we're starting to think about landscape design and what does that all entail. So we're trying to curtail, or I should say, make these videos more usable for you. So one of the things, when you think of landscape design, think about the area outside your house, the area surrounding your house that is not part of your house or garage. A lot of you that live in town or live in the country, you want a landscape around your house that is usable, has a purpose, but is also appealing to the eye. And there's a wide variety of ways that we can do that and achieve that. So the first thing is, make some type of plan. And what that means is, have a discussion with the rest of your family members. What is it that you want to use your backyard, your front yard? What purposes or what uses do you want in your yard? Is it for social gatherings? Is it for just very small groups? Do you want a lot of green space to do different activities? Do you want an area where you have flower gardens, a deck, a water feature, things of that nature? Today we're going to teach you a little about how to use those plants that you might have in the backyard, as well as non-plant related items, okay? So when we're looking at the different uses of backyard, what is it you spend most of your summer doing? We're also talking about maintenance. Do you want something that takes a lot of time and effort to maintain, or do you want something that's very simple and easy to maintain, right? And so when you make that plan, you come up with a list of goals of what you like in your backyard, and you might be saying, well, Mr. Hayden, I have no clue in terms of the plants that should be put in the backyard. Well, a very simple one to think about with the plant selection is, do you want plants? There's our first sump pump of the day. We're hearing from Whitewater Laundromat. When life gets you dirty, put it in the spin cycle. So when we're talking about plant selection, we're thinking about, do I want plants that are providing a lot of color? Do I want plants that provide privacy around my property line? Do I want plants that provide shade? Now keep in mind, we got to think back to our annual, biennial, and perennial plants. Annual plants are going to provide a lot of color, and those would be things like marigold, zinnia, we're talking about geranium. Those would be some examples of annual plants. They would look good in the front or back of the house as an area to provide a lot of color. Keep in mind, all annual plants in Iowa, they're going to have to replant every spring, so that might be a little more maintenance than you like. Our perennial plants are going to be plants that are going to be coming back year after year, and those are going to be more expensive to buy, but after purchasing them, you should not have to replant them for quite some time. Obviously, trees would be an example of a perennial, and they'll provide more shade and cover. A lot of bushes like rose bush, hydrangea, they can provide color, but also they provide color year after year. And then think about those perennial plants when you plant them, especially because you don't want to be moving them. Once you get them established, you don't want to take the work of trying to uproot them and move them again. So think about those more permanent spots that you want plants for different purposes there. And so when we're thinking about the plants there, the other thing that's important is plant height. If you have a flower bed in the front of the house, so as you can see right here, this is a rough draft of like a bubble diagram, is what landscape designers call. And this is just a rough idea of what you want in different areas of your yard. And so in the front, your yard there, by your sidewalk that goes to your garage, maybe you want a bunch of flowers right there. Well, some of the things that you have to know is, you have to know the amount of sun that plant requires to survive. So there's different levels of sun. So you have like sun loving, you have plants that are shade tolerant like hostas that will grow well on the north side of a garage. It has a lot of shade. It doesn't have as much color, but it is some type of plant that can grow in a heavy shaded area. But when we're talking about plant height, we want our tallest plants in the back. That way it provides a good backdrop for color. Some of our shortest plants in the front. That way they're not blocking out the plants. And then also when you think about plant selection, this is where maybe the budget comes into play. You might only be able to do one area of your house or yard to start with, and then you go from there after another growing season. The other thing is, you hear the terms softscaping and hardscaping. Softscaping refers to anything that water can move through. So an example of softscaping would be like a wood mulch, water can pass through, grass clippings, things of that nature, some rock, some sand. When we're talking about hardscaping, we're talking about paving stones, concrete, things that are more impermeable to water. And the reason that that's important is, obviously a flower bed area is going to need to be able to have water. In some instances, you might have some type of irrigation used to help those plants grow throughout the year. And a lot of landscape designers are going to use plants all around the edge of the house. They don't want that grass going up to the edge of the house. And we'll also talk about some landscape design principles here in a second. But when you talk about maintenance, a lot of you don't want to spend your whole summer maintaining something. You might focus more on perennial plants, things that were already there in the spring. They're going to come back. They might need some pruning. They might need some deadheading as they are doing their flowering. But you have to think about how many hours you want to devote to the maintenance of your landscaping. And then here are some landscape design principles. These are more, if you're a landscape architect, you're going to use these different things. When I think about a landscaper, did you know that, what do they call a landscaper's bank account? A hedge fund, okay? And so when we're talking about these different landscape design features, every landscape design should have a focal point. And a focal point is just a fancy term for what your eyes are drawn to when you either approach from the front of the house, or if you're looking maybe the back entrance of the house out into the backyard. So a lot of people choose the focal point of their house to be the front door, and they build their plants and their landscaping that kind of flows and brings your eyes naturally to that area. In the backyard, some people like to put like a water feature, a pond surrounded by plants behind it. Maybe you have like a gazebo or something of that nature, but something that your eyes are naturally drawn to. Symmetry just means that we have the same things on both sides of one point. So an example here might be if you have a sidewalk that goes in the middle right to your front door, you're going to have the same plants that are going to mirror on both sides of that. And that is naturally appealing to the human eye. It looks very organized. It looks very neat, like I said. And then another aspect we talk about is uniformity. And what that means there is in terms of spacing, we have the correct spacing between plants, and the spacing is repeated multiple times. A lot of you like that type of spacing where it's very uniform. Now, if you're going for more of the natural look, you got to think about in nature, we don't have very many straight lines. We have more curved lines. So some people use curved lines around the corners of their house to soften those lines of the house. They'll also group plants. And when you group plants in landscape design, you always want to group plants by odd numbers. So 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. It's just common rule of thumb for landscape architects. And so when you want more of a natural look, you might try to go more towards native plants to Iowa. There's things called ornamental grasses that provide a lot of nice color in the summer, green. And then when they go dormant in the fall, they still provide kind of a tannish color. And that even might look good in the wintertime when those plants are dormant. And then you trim that grass back in the spring for it to regrow. And it is a perennial. And then we did talk about the curved versus straight lines there. The main thing is you want your landscape to work for you. You don't want to make something that's really hard to maintain or takes too much of your time. You also don't want your landscape design to not feel welcoming. Like we said, using those hostas and those shaded areas, especially underneath trees that have a lot of foliage. If you don't like to mow or really close to trees, hostas are a good way to use those. And also when you talk about property lines, there's different types of hedges. Over here we have this. Like I said, just depends how much money you want to spend, how much time you'd like to do that. But the main goal for landscape design is to make something that works for you. And then one thing you're thinking about here, you're going to have to mow your yard coming up. You might be able to save on the time you mow by providing a larger area that's a landscape design, maybe flower beds, perennial or annual. But how do you know when it's time to get a new mower? Well, it's just not cutting it. So when you think about when you're mowing, make sure you're checking your blades and the different tools you use to maintain your yard. And so hopefully that gives you a little overview of landscape design. You don't have to hire a landscape architect. I think if you go to YouTube and watch some landscape design videos, you'll find some of these same principles right here. So with that, I appreciate you watching episode 13. Like I said, in the comments, leave me anything that you would like to see in future episodes. But we'll try to keep bringing you this content in this time of quarantine. We'll see you next time.